Welcome to Basement Tales with Sam Jackman, Charlie Einsman, Ed Grass, and Sandra Delancey. We have fun telling crazy but true stories about turning the worst possible property disasters into bags of money. Along the way, we'll pass along some important lessons to help you make cash on real estate. Sam and Charlie walked away from cubicle hell 25 years ago. Starting with no property, they created their own Clear Sky group of companies, sold hundreds of houses, bought dozens of rentals, and made millions in hard money loans. I'm Ed, a big firm litigator until muscular dystrophy made me find a hobby other than suing people. I miss it. Sandra's the normal person here with a real job plus some rentals. Her decades of friendship with the group, from office flunkies to property gurus, might help keep us all humble and focused on learning something. I wouldn't count on it. Well, there should be some distressed property then over on the Capitol Hill side of things.
All right, we ready to switch to our subject matter of today?
Yeah, do we have a plan this time finally, or
God,
No.
pre-foreclosures.
Pre-foreclosures?
Oh, I like that. Is this part of like how to find property? And
Pre-foreclosures, which leads me to a pre-foreclosure story.
Oh, here we go. That's what
Start
we're
off
at
with the
Basement
story.
Tales.
Start off with a story. Good job.
Start off with a classic story. So one of the things that we do is we look for pre-foreclosures, and what they basically are these are houses that have been published for a foreclosure sale. And so what happens is once your property is going to foreclosure, it gets published in the newspaper. And so then what happens is usually you got 3 to 4 weeks before it actually goes to sale. Well, that 3 or 4 weeks is considered the pre-foreclosure time frame. So one of the things that we do is we look at the ads and we just check out the ads, check out whatever loan is foreclosing to determine if there's enough equity to go buy the property to see if it's worth us buying it in pre-foreclosure. Well, this one particular house that was a pre-foreclosure candidate, it was in Woodbridge, Virginia on Horner Road. And so we knocked on the door like I usually do, and I leave a brochure. And the brochure basically says 3 ways to avoid foreclosure. One of them was refinance your house. Number 2 was we would give them money to list their house on the market to bring their house current. And number 3 is we would give you $500 with a signed contract to buy the house. So I left the guy the brochure. The guy calls us back, and Sam and myself, we meet him at his house. And so one of the things that we do when we go to meet these people in pre-foreclosure is we actually will have the title work done so that we understand, what's on title, what liens, how much he owes. And so we'll bring that with us. We'll be armed with that so that we're ready to make a deal. So we go to this house, and it was at night. He was home. And so we went into his house. Well, the entire house was loaded from floor to ceiling with newspapers. So on the main, it was a 2-level house. So on the main level, loaded floor to ceiling with newspapers, and upstairs, newspapers from floor to ceiling. But there were little like rat traps, mazes, so you can get through there to get to the bathroom, to get to his bedroom, to get to the kitchen, mind you. So we could go through as if we were in a maze around these newspapers to get to wherever he needed to get to. So then the next question is, well, where did we meet the guy? Well, we sort of met the guy in the space where it had enough room between the newspapers. So we had newspapers behind us, newspapers in front of us, and newspapers to the side. So part of the discussion on buying the house was that, okay, sir, not a big deal. You can leave the house as is, where is. We're just going to buy it. And then we're going to go ahead and empty out the house and throw everything away. Yeah, this is where the comes in. So then the guy goes, he looks at us, he goes, the hell you are. You're not going to touch my newspapers.
Oh, wow.
And so I looked at Sam. I said, what the hell is this guy talking about? Who cares? It's just a bunch of newspapers. And then I'm thinking, okay, well, he must have newspapers that were going back years and decades, and that there must be a lot of collectibles in the newspapers. And so we just looked at it and we said, okay, no problem. He goes, why do you not want us to get rid of the newspapers? He goes, and this guy was older. Sam, what do you say, 65, 70 years old?
Yeah. He had worked in a car dealer, right?
Yeah.
I was going to say, was he a newspaperman or something?
No, he's a car dealer. He collected a lot of cash.
Yeah. So what he did is he sold used cars. And so when he sold used cars, he would collect cash for all those used cars. And so he was really worried about, I guess, depositing the cash in the bank. Who knows why? So what he would do is he would take all the cash that he made from selling a car and he would dump it in the inserts of all these newspapers. So all these newspapers throughout his house had cash in them somewhere, somehow.
Mm.
And so that's why we couldn't get rid of the newspapers.
One match.
Wow.
One match. That's all it would take.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
His whole life savings.
So did you offer to, rent a storage locker for him and move his newspapers, or?
We've offered that many times, the storage locker, but not for the newspaper guy.
Not for the
Yeah.
newspaper man. And so the guy
Like
was
Fort Knox there though with all that money.
It was Fort Knox, but so as push comes to shove, we just couldn't come to an agreement with the guy because he wouldn't allow us to remove the newspapers, and so that deal went bust. But
Over
that's our
that.
story of the newspaper guy.
Wow. So has it ever been successful? Have you gotten, a pre-foreclosure deal like that?
Oh, we've gotten hundreds of them. But
Yeah.
this particular story is just one for the books, one that we'll never forget. I still remember to this day him going into his trunk, telling us how he would go into his trunk after he would sold the car. He threw this cash in the trunk. He would get home. He would take that cash and he would deposit it into the newspapers. And so that's all I remember about that particular house. And I know exactly where it was, on Horner Road in Woodbridge, Virginia. That's all I remember.
In the normal course, we don't ever end up with the things they leave behind because we send a crew in and then the crew goes
And the
through.
crew would have found all that
Yeah.
money had it been that way. You guys would have lost out.
They
on all of
find
that.
all kinds of stuff: TVs, massage chairs,
Oh, yeah.
Money.
guns, lots of
Bones.
stuff. Bones,
Coins. Our crew found some coins.
Mhm.
coins. Yeah.
They found a lot of
Charlie kept
collectibles.
saying, "Won't they give us the gold if they find the gold?" I'm like, Charlie, do you
No.
think they're going to give us the gold?
I'm sure they found gold. You guys have missed out
Oh,
on some
yeah.
opportunities. They
We
found
have.
some good stuff.
They
before, I'm
found some
sure.
bad stuff too, though. So I'll take it where I left it.
Not a chance. And the most recent foreclosure that we did purchase, and this one's on Forestdale, that house was loaded as well, but not with newspapers. It was supposedly loaded with junk, right? But in our opinion,
We
was
bought it
loaded with
pre-foreclosure.
junk, right? We bought that one pre-foreclosure. It was with the lady who had died, and she had been deceased for a couple of years, and so the only living heir was her sister. And the house was loaded with just boxes and junk and everything, and so, but her sister was under the impression that it was loaded with antiques, and there wasn't one antique in that house.
No. It was, it wouldn't even been anything you could sell at a thrift store.
Right.
It was all moldy and terrible. And she was just beside herself that we were ready to throw it away.
Hmm.
So we stopped throwing it away in
Right.
process. And we even left the dumpster full outside with the stuff in it with a blue tarp on it, just so
Yep.
she could go through it again. And she never did come back. She
Yeah.
just waited for 2 months.
Yeah, just another hoarder house that we had purchased at a pre-foreclosure. And so, when you buy these houses pre-foreclosure, you've got to be ready to close in a week or less, because the foreclosure sale is imminent, and that these folks are under a time crunch. And so you've got to be able to perform. Usually in our case, it's been a week or less, because they finally realized that, oh, the foreclosure sale is next week. Either I'm going to bring the loan current, or maybe I'll file a bankruptcy, which sometimes happens, or I got to do something with the house. And so most of our pre-foreclosure buys have been in a week or less. I would say probably 70% of them, right, Sam?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So you guys saying that if you see a foreclosure, like it comes up in the newspaper, has to go there first. If I can get to that person, pre-foreclosure, pre the sale, then I can actually purchase it before it goes into foreclosure, before it's actually sold at the
That's
at
exactly
auction.
right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And if you act fast, you can help people solve problems.
Yeah.
They leave with more equity. They have a planned exit from the property, and then you
Yeah.
get the benefit of the bargain of having, an asset that you can fix up or keep.
Yeah.
Why,
So
why wouldn't we want to do that? Why wouldn't we want? Why
It's the
shouldn't
number one
everyone
thing
do
in
that?
this market. This is a perfect time to do it because
yeah.
people have a lot of equity in their homes.
Right.
And now they have, unfortunately, an inability to make payments on their properties. A lot of people have, suffering from COVID, unrelated unemployment, but they're not quite ready to accept that when that happens, that they become foreclosed homeowners. They still won't have moved to sell it. A lot of people will just
Right.
drag their feet hoping to solve this,
Yeah.
and then you can help them at the end. Now, they do take a bit of a discount, but again, they have no real estate fee. They haven't paid their bills forever. You help them transition in a smooth way. You are providing a lot of benefits to people, and they're going to be evicted anyhow if the house gets sold at foreclosure and they get evicted. So at least this organizes a transition for them. We made plenty of friends with people doing it this way.
Yeah.
And right today, you can't do it necessarily, like literally right now at this part of the year. But when we get further into the end of all these moratoriums, there'll be a lot of opportunity for people.
But what about, do I have to have $200,000 or $300,000 or $400,000 sitting in my bank account? Or
That's a great question.
if I find one of these, is there enough time to call up Charlie and get a loan?
Sure. Yeah, we can do a loan right away on that if you've got one and you want to make a move. That's perfect for using a hard money lender. And that's also perfect if you happen to have the benefit of a home equity line of credit,
Yeah.
or have cash or something like that.
Yeah.
You can
Yeah.
extend yourself
Yep.
at that time and just do it on your own. You save yourself the hard money lender fees. But so then you can offer the seller more money and you have a higher likelihood of a deal. But a hard money lender is great for a pre-foreclosure.
Mhm.
Yeah, perfect. And then the other thing that you need to do, Sandra, is once you see the ad, right, you have to determine what the foreclosing instrument is that's being foreclosed on. And so then what you do is you look up the loan amount of what's foreclosing, and then you sort of do a quick analysis on how much the property is worth to determine if there's enough equity for you to make that into a pre-foreclosure candidate. And then
Mhm.
once you've decided that, yes, this is indeed a pre-foreclosure candidate, then you reach out to them. We do what's called a triangulation method. So we try and reach out to them three ways. Number one, we'll actually go to the house and give them a brochure. That we always do that. If they're not home, we'll just tape it to the door. But if they do answer, and if it's a child that answers, we always say, "Can we speak to your mom or dad to get an adult
Mhm.
in the room?" If no one's home, then we just come back,
Right.
and we do come back, or I just give the kid the card. I won't give them the brochure. And the second part of the triangulation is we get their phone number or phone numbers, and then third thing we do is we get their email address. And so we go through a triangulation to try and get a hold of them, to try and contact them that way. Now, what you have to understand is that a lot of people are trying to contact these folks, but what
Right.
they're doing is they're contacting the lazy way. They're just go ahead and sending them a form letter, and so their mailbox gets loaded with these form letters. Very few people actually stop by the house.
Yeah, it takes courage to walk up and talk to someone at their door about what could be a very sensitive matter.
Yeah.
And also you have to be cognizant of the jurisdiction that you're in, because it's not lawful to do that in Maryland, for example. Person who's in financial distress, you can't approach everybody and solicit a purchase of their home, for example. Especially if you're a real estate licensee, you're in an even more controlled communication with people. But in Virginia and DC, you can speak to people about opportunities to sell their home.
And you can email them and call them.
In Maryland, like, could Sandra go up, or is it just
No, but
real estate broker that can't, or if you know? I've heard of this, but I don't really know the details.
I don't have the specifics on it, but I don't think that any person could act as in a business way to approach a distressed homeowner in Maryland. I don't think
The laws are definitely different.
Yeah. We simply avoid that.
Yeah, and
doing
I
that, so I
learned,
don't know all the nuances of it.
yeah, and I learned the hard way. Sam, you might have been there.
No, at the conference.
Yeah, Think Realty
Yeah.
Conference. Matter of fact, I think this was 4 years ago. We were doing a how to find distressed assets presentation in at the Think Realty Conference in Baltimore, and one of our topics was on pre-foreclosures. And so I actually showed them 3 or 4 ads, trustee sale ads from the paper. I identified out of the 3 or 4 ads which one was the one that we would go after in a pre-foreclosure way. And I told them exactly how we did it in Virginia. And so, mind you, we're at a Maryland conference. I mean, we're in Baltimore, Maryland, so we're in Maryland at a conference. And so the audience kind of let me have it a little bit after the topic was over because we let them obviously ask questions. And so that was one of the things that came up as far as the laws in the state of Maryland. It has something to do with the predatory laws in Maryland. That if you go to one of the houses in the neighborhood with a specific purpose, you got to go to all of the houses within that street. You can't just stop by that one house. So there definitely are rules and regulations in Maryland. And so I was sort of kind of given a mini chastising at the conference itself. So
Yeah, I mean, with all those kind of regulatory things, I think the best way that the way we've handled it is, if there's even like any nuance that it could be problematic, just avoid it. There's just too many ways to legitimately make money that if you have to start slicing things and need a lawyer to interpret the rules, no offense, Ed, but that's just too much. Just stop there and just go to a market that appreciates the value that you're adding, right? You don't want to be looked at when you come to someone's door and as a hostile person. You want to try to add value to their. You're not trying to add to their problems.
Now, I will say, not to defend lawyers or lawyering, but sometimes what those rules create is because of exactly the effect that you described, is a barrier to entry for competitors. So if I just pick California as a fairly heavily regulated state with foreclosures, and now
with
there's
everything.
all these
Yeah.
everything, but with housing, there's waiting periods, and there's all these things with foreclosures. If you can, now it's obviously not for beginner unless you're a beginner lawyer who's involved in real estate, but if you can work with people and develop enough knowledge to operate in that market, it can end up being a very strong market, because a lot of people, rightly, like you, will say, I'll just go to a simpler place to operate where I don't have to worry about that. So what makes me think a little bit about like tax liens, that the tax lien stuff is so oddly complicated for no apparent reason in some jurisdictions, that it restricts the people that can effectively learn about it and then bid on it. But if you're willing to put in the time and effort to become one of those people, there's less fishermen in the sea, I suppose. But again, for beginners, beware of high regulatory areas that you
Yeah.
may unknowingly, look, even a guy with Charlie's experience, because something that's perfectly normal and well received in Virginia and DC, and you're like, what? There's a rule against that in Maryland? I mean, so we try to keep our eyes out for that sort of stuff. But yeah,
you gotta,
it's
So
definitely
for the
gotta know the
beginners
laws.
though, how does a beginner know what the rules and regulations are? Do we just, talk to the experts, consult with someone, talk to our lawyer, our $499
No, I don't
lawyer?
I talked to someone who's doing it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Talk to someone who's doing it.
Yeah, I think the best approach would be to, like you said, go to RIAs, real estate investment associations, or REICs, real estate investment clubs, and ask around, because anybody who's fixing and flipping houses knows what you can and can't do from a pre-foreclosure standpoint. Now, the other thing that we need to talk about, and we have our resident lawyer on hand, is that when you buy a pre-foreclosure, the entire title chain comes in play. So you're buying the house directly from the owner. So it's going to behoove you that you're going to need to understand what is on that house as far as the title is concerned, how many loans there are there any HOA liens, are there any condo liens, are there any IRS liens, what that title looks like. Because when you're buying it directly from an owner, you have to pay off all the debts. And so you really have got to understand the title chain as well. Now in a foreclosure, once it gets to the courthouse steps, most of the junior liens are blown away. So it's not as important, but pre-foreclosure, you got to know what you're getting into.
Yeah, well, particularly, you're right. If you're buying it directly, they could, and they have a second lien that you're not really paying attention to. You could have a big surprise when you go to try to settle or afterwards.
Oh yeah,
That's what makes me
we've had
nervous.
surprises. We've had, thinking of these pre-foreclosures, we've have had some basement tales. Remember, we bought a house from a guy who flew up from Florida just for that closing, just to sign it. Charlie, remember that guy?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Well, and we've had folks that we've given rides to, they don't have transportation, and
Yeah.
we set absolutely every last thing up for them, including stopping by to give them a ride to the settlement company. I can't remember.
And then we had the, like we said on the earlier podcast, we had the settlement in jail. Remember,
Oh, yeah.
he had to go and get the guy to
Oh, yeah.
sign in jail. I mean,
Did
we
we
just-
really hear about that? I don't think I remember the one about the guy in
that was
jail.
that was the alien spaceship house.
Yeah, they had the
Oh.
Tin
spaceship.
cans and,
Yeah.
and
The wife was ready. She wasn't even on the paperwork, but the husband, he was imprisoned, and so our title attorney had no hesitation to go down to the jailhouse and do a quick closing there. Apparently that happens with some frequency. There's a lot of legal things signed in the jailhouse
From jail. Okay.
How quickly can you get a title search done? I mean, I do know I'm starting to figure out some of these jurisdictions. You can actually look, like in DC, you can look on the online DC.
Yeah, Charlie runs a title in
deeds.
5 minutes, but to
Mhm.
actually get a title and ready to close, in Virginia, you can do it in a day or two. In DC, it can take quite a while. And how about Maryland, Charlie?
Well, we're
How
fortunate
is-
enough that we have some of these tools at our disposal, but
Yeah.
as Sandra's going to ask the question, well, what happens if you're a new investor? Well,
Sure.
one of the things that you need to do as a new investor is that you need to find out who the investor-friendly title companies are and who's willing to do these title searches pretty lickety split. Because like in our case, we were fortunate enough in our younger days to actually co-own a title company. And so it was, I would call in for a title search and I would have it back in an hour, but that's basically unheard of. And so that's not, for a new investor, that's not really going to fly. So what you have to do as a new investor, first figure out who the investor friendly title companies are in your area, get a relationship with either the closing attorney or a title abstractor. But the rule of thumb is, in order for you to sort of solidify these relationships, if you get a deal, any kind of a deal, you had better close with those guys to keep solidifying your relationship.
Mhm.
Because remember, these guys don't make money unless you close the deal with them. And so they don't get reimbursed for their title search. Well, sometimes if some of our deals didn't close and we had title work done on it, he would just send us an invoice and we would pay per title search that didn't close. But that was us and we're more experienced. But for you beginners, you got to make sure that your loyalties are true and you got to stay loyal to that person and close your deal with that actual title company.
And if you want to take it one step further, if you want to learn about these things yourself, there is really no problem in getting access to local county records. If you're going to just work in one jurisdiction, like say I'm in Fairfax or Prince William or wherever I am, and just really understand how the land records work, how to research them, because you'll find other information in there. You'll find out who's involved in trustees' work, how the title has been held by different people, how it's been transferred. You'll learn a lot of things about the transaction, which will support your understanding of getting the next deal to closing. So it's not a waste to learn a lot about how these titles are held in your particular jurisdiction.
There are courses or something that someone could take on that?
I've
do
never
title
seen
searches?
such a course, but when I first started, they used to have like terminals in a building, and that's where everyone would go. Title researchers would be there. And then you could ask those people who were doing work, hey, I need to look up this name. How might I do that? Or something like that. And then they would help you and the clerk would help you and so forth. But that's a long time ago now. So I don't even know how you might figure it out.
Well, that's a
Yeah,
great,
most of the places like Fairfax still has the terminals, and they have a little instruction book. I know you can
Yeah.
do that. I can't remember how easy it is to understand, but then a lot of the stuff is online. Like DC, if you poke
Yeah.
around, you can
Yeah.
find their registry of deeds, and it's fairly easy to use and
Yeah.
fairly inexpensive to actually pull down some of the documents. But I wonder if there's a way around that. I mean, if I'm a new investor and I find a pre-foreclosure or another quick sale thing, I mean, couldn't I just enter a contract to buy the place and then do the title search? Because
Sure, but then you
if
get
it
to the surprise. Like, does the
Right.
right,
HOA have a $10,000 lien? And did I promise to give the person, the seller, $10,000? Now there's no money left.
Yeah.
uh-huh,
Is the foreclosing deed of trust a second and not a first? There's a lot of surprises, and you don't want to be surprised a week or two into the deal, especially when you're so excited emotionally. Oh, I'm under contract to buy a great deal. And then, if you're wholesaling it, maybe you're wholesaling it, you've already got it wholesale, flipping the contract to somebody else just to find out that you're shit out of luck because the title is showing too many liens and it's
And you're
over.
developing a pretty deep relationship with these
Yeah.
people too. So you don't want to have them in any way feel misled at the end when they get to their settlement statement and then they're like, oh, well, this isn't the amount of money you told me. Because you're still relying on vacate the house, do this, do that, sign the papers, maybe have some follow-up item after they leave,
Well, I mean, Ed does present a pretty good question. You can definitely go under contract with the seller. And I'm assuming that part of getting it under contract with the seller, you've actually, well, pre-COVID, you've actually sat with them in their living room and discussed what liens are against the house. So, I mean, the seller if you're dealing with an honest seller, they're going to disclose to you, well, I've got two loans. I got a loan with such and such and a loan with such and such. Here are the bank statements. Oh, I'm a little late on my HOA, or there's not an HOA. So if you sit down and just have an honest discussion with the seller, you're going to be sitting down with them anyway to have them fill out a contract and to sign a contract. So hopefully 9 times out of 10, they're going to be telling you the truth. So when the title work does come back, you just make sure you're not surprised. That's all.
yeah.
because if you write up a contract and it turns out you get the settlement and there's a surprise or 2 days before settlement, oh, the nice honest person was totally nice and honest but somehow forgot the third trust that's on it, they can't hold up their end of the sales contract.
That's right.
Because
And
they
you've
have to
wasted all these
deliver it.
cycles. Yeah.
Well, that's true. It's a lot of waste. Well, particularly if, at least if you can check the online resources yourself, it's not that expensive. You should be able to see a recorded lien there. And so having learned that, even a relatively new person could learn that.
So, we're talking a lot about title today. We had an interesting case on a property in Capitol Heights, and it just happened this week, Charlie. That so it was a loan we gave, and the guy renovated that property and sold it and closed on the sale of it. And in between, it was ordinary in terms of a flip, but in the middle of that, we got a notice from a prior, was it a judgment holder, Charlie, or a
It was a
note
judgment that was filed in Virginia.
judgment? A judgment, and it was misfiled when it was filed in the district. It was filed with like the word "the" missing or something. Just a common, administrative mistake. And what happened was he acquired this house, and that judgment didn't get paid off. It was never shown, and the judgment holder figured it out and said, "Oh, we got a new buyer here, a new owner here. We're going to go ahead and go after him to pay this judgment." And of course, anyone who works with us, they have to get title insurance, and this is exactly why, right? So they put us on they put the owner on notice, and they put us on notice, and we had title insurance. Our attorney let the title insurance company know, hey, we've got some stuff going on here. They went ahead and got to closing. This is still not resolved, because while the loan paid off to us on the very day that the payoff happened, but we don't know when the recordation happened. On the very day, a judge approved that judgment would be tied to this asset. So we didn't really end up finding out whether they have a valid claim that'll have to be made by title insurance, or whether it's just going to get blown away. But in anyhow, that's why you have title insurance, and that's one of the things that can come up. And everyone's acting in good faith. You know, the guy who bought this house, he certainly had no knowledge of that, and then when he sold it, he hadn't been alerted to any definitive knowledge of a judgment, and so there you have it. It's just a cascading mess of title problems.
Well, and it's darned irritating. That title insurance is not cheap. I mean, you see that line item, it's like what, 1,000, 2,000 more,
sure.
depending on how big the property is. It's like a lot. You know, my house didn't burn today, but I paid a lot of fire insurance on my house. But when that title light's on fire,
yeah, no,
you
it's
guys
a real
have,
problem.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you
so
guys
we've
have hit a
probably
couple,
had,
right?
yeah, so we've had, I think, 3 title insurance issues in the time that we've probably done 2,000 transactions. So that'll tell you about the rate. You probably get 1 per 1,000. What do you think, Charlie?
Yeah, I think one of these times we should do a podcast just on title searches and title insurance and title claims and how it actually works. I mean, that would be a great topic.
One of our first, we got thrashed in the basement on this tale. Remember that guy?
ADU.
A basement thrashing, is that going to be a new segment?
They really beat that ass early on.
It was as a matter of fact, it was a pre-foreclosure buy on what's called an affordable dwelling unit.
It wasn't called that when we bought it. Okay, so we went to buy it. We were pleased. It was a reasonable value. It wasn't some steal or something. And it was a nice townhouse in Loudoun County.
It was in Loudoun County. Yep.
We bought it. We closed it. The guy moved to Texas. It all seemed pretty ordinary. And then one day, I'm driving along, and the title attorney calls me. We already have the house that's being sold. The title attorney calls me. He says, "Hey, can I come over to your house and meet with you tonight?" I said, "Oh, that's never happened before."
Maybe it was a date. Was it a date?
Yeah. Well, it wasn't exact. Actually, the sequence was someone gave me a call and said, "Hey, I'd like to buy this house, but I can't because it's an affordable dwelling unit." And I said, "Oh, I don't know what you're speaking of." So I called the title attorney on the cell phone and let him know. Then I didn't hear anything back from him. I didn't think anything of it. And then I got a call later in the evening and said, "Hey, can I come on over?" And that's when he let us know.
Yeah, and just to explain, I'm not sure if you that certain properties, I guess nowadays in some jurisdictions, they'll say, "All right, developer, we'll let you build this row of townhouses, but you can build 20 townhouses, but 2 of them have to be affordable dwelling units that are set at a lower rate so that certain people have to qualify." The hope being that somebody with less money can buy this, but then develop equity by living there a long time and, enter the middle class and all the good things that property can do. But they're restricted for that reason on, well, you get that super good deal and then turn around and sell it at a market rate. That would kind of defeat the whole idea. So there's a restriction. The ADU or affordable dwelling unit says it's a title restriction, basically, that you can't sell it to somebody above a certain income or whatever the rules are.
So our seller, he had a clever move here. So the first thing he did is pulled a cash out refi on. He misrepresented that it wasn't an ADU. He pulled a cash out refi, and that was, say, 2 years before we bought it.
But those were the guys that missed the ADU.
And they missed the ADU, the first guys, the cash out. So now he had a big loan against it. So it didn't look like it was like suspect, like an ADU unit, right? Because it had a regular commercial mortgage that was a high value mortgage. And then he said, "Oh, hell with it, I ain't going to pay the bills." So he didn't pay his bills. And then he said, well, since I'm not paying my bills, maybe these clowns will buy my house from me. And sure enough, we showed up. We bought the house. No one catches it because they only did a bring down to the last title work that was done for the refinance. Yep. And he gets away with the money. He left with a bag.
Right. And so the numbers work like this. The guy bought it for 105.
Yeah.
And then each year it appreciated per the county restrictions, like 106, 108, 110, et cetera, right? Because of the ADU restrictions. He then refinances it for 150. So he pulls out 50 grand. We come in and buy it for about, I don't know, 165. The after repair value on the property is about 275 to 300. So we're in there at a good deal. And so what we did is we got owners, thank God, we got owners title insurance on it at our purchase price of 165. This guy's happy as a lark because he got his 50 grand on the refi. He's getting an extra 10,000 bucks from us.
He flees to Texas.
He flees to Texas. We then renovate the house. I mean, it wasn't that bad of a renovation.
No, just some
$20,000 renovation.
Yeah.
So we put 20 grand into it, renovated it, put that sucker on the market, and that's when we got the old infamous ADU phone call.
Yeah. And now you want to know how long that took to unwind. You think that you have an insurance policy, and it's like an auto claim where Geico comes and then they send you a check 3 days later. Title insurance doesn't really quite work like that. They actually won't pay your claim unless you hire a lawyer to sue your own title insurance company to get them to remit payment for a claim. So then you're back to your $500 an hour lawyer, Sandra, just to use your policy that you already paid for.
No. Sandra wants a $499 total lawyer, not
All
per
in.
Yeah, no
hour.
total. Oh yeah.
Man.
This is
Not
$500
$4.99 an hour.
And so,
We hired a pretty good lawyer for that, but he was half asleep working on it.
well, it didn't matter. Remember, not only did it take us a year to resolve, but part of us resolving it, we had to agree to put it back into the ADU system.
Yeah.
And then sell it to a person that could buy affordable dwelling unit. And then that money would go to pay the claim. Plus they paid us a little bit above that to make us whole.
Plus they made the title examiner pay, and our poor title company guy had to pay. He had to file a claim too. It was like his first claim ever.
His E&O insurance.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, errors and omissions. Most professionals have an E&O for that sort of thing, but it gets complicated, right? You got to figure out who's responsible, and the insurance companies start fighting each other
And it
because
was
the
early
title
for us.
insurer wants the E&O insurer to pay, and then you're stuck there like, can I get my money back, please?
They're like,
Just
no.
we'll get around to you. But and the funny thing about the ADUs, I think sometimes those are in the deed. So it's not that easy to find. Usually, like if you have a restriction like a loan, it's its own thing. And I think sometimes they're recorded separately like that. But funny thing, I remember when you told me that story because I saw a property for foreclosure sale. And I saw that it was in an ADU community.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, that doesn't make any sense. Why? I knew nobody would be interested for that reason. So I looked up, and that particular property had a release from the ADU program. For what reason, I have no idea. But the property had been, and I think it was like a 20-year period they were supposed to be in. And this was released at like the 10-year period. Who knows what happened? Somebody must have screwed something up. So then I went to the foreclosure auction. Nobody else bid for it. Yeah. And so there's like 3 people. One guy looked at me like, are you nuts? It's like an ADU property, but it's a great rental because it could actually be resold and I could actually own it. And I still own that rental to this day.
And then that thing is a neat rental because it's a little smaller than all the others, that property. And it really gets a lot of rent value for the, for the price you paid.
Right. And so the ADU restriction period is usually between 15 to 25 years. And like you said, Ed, it's definitely buried in the deed. The deed restriction is buried in there. And that's what happened in our case, that the title company was lazy. They only went back to the refinance event. They never even went back to look at the deed. So that's how
I still remember being at the settlement table. That was in the old days when I would go to the settlement table with the people who were closing. That guy was there. That guy was taking the money. I signed that thing. And he took that money and left town.
For an investor like me, we noticed it when we see that the prices are so low. I saw one the other day, And I'm like, oh my gosh, why hasn't anyone grabbed this property up? It's like so below value. And I look at it and it's like, okay, 55% of the area median income and blah, blah, blah. And all
Well, in
these other
DC,
restrictions.
you
I'm
can
like,
buy some restricted assets. They'll have unique sales. They're not ADUs, but you have to make them your own ADU. You have to do them as
yes,
affordable,
Yeah.
but you have to
yes,
do it for like a full lifetime. So it's like a
a
20-year
whole
deal.
lifetime,
So if
20
you're committed
years. Yeah.
to taking care of an ADU for 20 years for
You
other
can get this
people,
property for $50,000.
you get it cheap, and then your kids might be rich, but you might
Right,
die in the
Yeah.
process. Just dealing with all the complexity, all that.
right,
Yep.
right.
I think
Okay.
Sandra's a very reasonable person, but I think she draws the line at dying to get a property.
Yeah, it's exhausting.
That and
It's a lot of work.
the $2,500 lawyers,
That's right. It's
where
a
I
lot,
draw the
it's a lot of
line.
work. It's a lot of work. There's pitfalls, but it's a lot of work. So
Yeah.
Mhm.
I'm feeling attacked here, but
Ed, I'm very sorry.
Not you, Ed.
well, it does go back to the knowledge is power thing. I mean, even as a beginner, just read as much as you can, listen to Basement Tales, and you start to learn this stuff. And again, when you know some of this, the more you know, the better you can value and find the cracks in the system to do some of this stuff legally and make real money, because the other people haven't done their homework. I mean, Charlie's the homework guru
yeah.
on all of these pre-foreclosures and everything else, and it takes work. But the thing is, it's doable if you're willing to put in the work. I don't think there's anything anybody can't learn. You don't need to be a $500 an hour lawyer. You just need to be curious and listen and figure out what's going on that way.
So if you have questions or you have a story that you want to tell or join us, you can email us at yourstory@basementtales.com.
Yeah, and I think just
YOURSTORY @basementtales.com.
2 T's in Basement Tales. And yeah, I think it doesn't have to be a story, right? You can tell us a story even in audio, and we can use some of the clip anonymously or not, however you want. But if you just want to curse us out or tell us that you think we're stupid, or hopefully there's something that you want to hear more of or that you're enjoying, that works too. But we'd love to hear your stories, hopefully of triumphs, but woe as well. That's the way it works.
And we did eventually get our money back from the business license
Oh, you did?
that we filed. Yeah, incorrectly. Yeah.
Wow.
Because wasn't that like $1,000 or something? Wasn't that a lot
It
of
was
money?
only like $299 or something.
Still,
But you got it back.
We
Congratulations.
got it
Yeah,
back.
that's a big coup right there.
That's a
tough.
win.
Mm-hmm.